Welcome to the second video where we're talking about planning and conceptualization. Planning and conceptualization? I don't need that. You do. Yes, planning and conceptualization is so important in Excel VBA. That's why it gets into our essential Excel VBA beginner technique series. But how do we get started with it? Well, I've got an exercise for you, and in the file, we've got our 7 techniques from the first video, and there are 7 concepts. Then we've got 7 definitions. All you have to do is match up the definition with the concept. See if you can beat me. Let's go. Oh, by the way, I'm using the Alt key on the Windows PC. Hold down the Alt key when you move the shape. That will get them to line up with the grid lines. Let's get back into it. So that's it. I think I managed to get it done. Did you get it done too? So what's the point of all this? Well, it's good revision for you. There's no doubt about that, but it gets us thinking conceptually. Can you describe in your own language, not in technical language or in VBA or a computer programming language, in your own language, what these things actually do? If you can do that, it means you've got a clear idea in your own head. That means you're ready to plan a computer program, and a macro, of course, is a computer program. With that said, let's get back into the file and let's start conceptualizing and planning the task that we're trying to do. We've got our task written at the top here. We've got to color the rows according to the date. So every time there's a new date, we want to introduce a new color. So we're going to have alternating colors. That's going to allow us to distinguish between the dates. But that's a difficult task to do, no doubt about it. So how do we go about it? Do we just jump into the code? Absolutely not. First, we conceptualize and we plan. What concepts can we bring to the table to get this done? So let's do that now. I'm going to open up the VBA Editor here. So you can go Developer tab and then Visual Basic Editor, open up the VBA Editor. We're going to do this in a new module. So we're going to go Insert a Module. Then we're going to create a new macro. So let's say something like Color Cells is an informative name for the macro. And then this is the difficult part. What are the concepts we can call on? Well, we're going to have to work with something in Excel. We know Excel consists of objects, and let's work with the cells. Let's work with the cells in column D, those cells that we're trying to color. And let's say select cell, which is an object, of course. So we're just going to put object in brackets, select cell object, this all cells, let's say all cells in column D. Now what you would have noticed is right at the beginning I've put an inverted comma there, an inverted comma. That means that when we get off this line of code, Excel is going to make it green, which means it becomes a comment, and when Excel runs the code it will ignore that. So it's a great facility for us to make notes on what we're doing, to note down the concepts we're using, and this is going to help us understand it better. So we've got our first idea here. We're working with the cell objects. We want to do a repeated set of actions. We want to go through each cell and then color the cell according to something that's going on. We'll get to that in a second, but what have we got at our disposal to repeat an instruction? So we could do loops here. So let's say loop through all cells in column D. And we know when we open a loop, we've got to close a loop at the same time. I'm just going to put an inverted comma here to make sure this is a comment. And then we're going to say open loop. So this is the beginning of the loop. And then we're just going to copy paste this comment. So Control C on the Windows PC, Control V. And then we're going to say close loop here. So open loop and close loop. So we've introduced here the concept of a loop. If you're enjoying this video, just to let you know, I do a daily video on Instagram and Facebook under the hashtag YourDailyTiger. So I might see you there. Let's get back into it. So we've managed to loop through the cells. Then what else do we want to do? If we're selecting a certain cell, working with a cell, what do we want to do? Well, we want to set a condition. We want to say to Excel VBA, If something is happening, then do this. If something's not happening, then do that. Now, what's our logic here? Well, our logic is going to be if the cell above the cell we're looking at, so we're looking at row 6 here, if the cell above the cell we're looking at is not the same date, then we want to do something. So there's a lot for us to think about there. So what concepts can we bring to the table? Well, we're talking about position here. We've got to look at the cell above. So we can say use offset to check the cell above. And is the date the same? So we've got our offset concept coming in there, but we've got to do more than that, of course, because we're setting a condition. If the date is the same, we want to do this. So what do we need here? We need a conditional or an if statement. So conditional statement to check if the date is different. And there we go. So we can see our code building up here, just building up these comments, gradually building up the code. So we're going to check if the cell above is a different color, then we're going to use a conditional statement to do that. So if the conditional statement says, yes, the cell's a different color, we want to do something. We want to change colors effectively. And this is probably the most difficult part of this video. What could help us do this? Remember, a color is a property. So we're going to say adjust the color property of the cell. And we could use the macro recorder to record that code, to record the code question mark, or we might be able to call on some organic code to do that. We'll see in the next video what the best approach is. But this color property, so we're looking to store some information there, store some information. We can't put this color property in a cell. We just want it to exist in Excel VBA. So what's going to help us do that? We can use a variable, of course. If we're using a variable, then we need to declare the variable at the top here. Declare variable to store, declare the variable to store the color property. And this is probably going to be an integer variable because we're going to look at a way to do this using a whole number. While we're at the top, let's think about other variables we might need. Where else might we need a variable in this routine? Well, you can remember from the first video, we were using a variable to control the loop. Let's declare another variable to control the loop. So we've got our two variables being declared at the top, and that's good practice, declaring the variables at the top of the module. What type of variable is this second variable? This is also going to be an integer variable. So we've declared our variables. What are we going to use these variables for? They're places to store information, of course. Well, if we go through our routine, we're going to check if the date in the cell above is different. If it's different, then we want different coloring. That means we're going to change the value of that variable. So let's say change value of variable to alternative color. So that information we're storing, we've changed it. We now need to get that information from the variable in order to color the cell. And we've got this line of code here. So there we go. And use this line to color the cell. Now, when we're using variables, we need to remember one more thing, which is it's best to initialize the variable. So at the top of the routine, we want to allocate a value to the variable just to make sure it's got a reasonable value in it. It's not going to create an error or something like that. So we can say initialize the color variable here by allocating a value to it. So we're going to allocate a value to that variable. That value is going to represent a particular color. We're going to have two values for two different colors. That's going to allow us to achieve this alternating effect. So we're close to completing our planning and conceptualization, but what else do we need to do? Maybe you can go back to the list and think, what techniques have we not used yet? Well, we haven't communicated with the user. We need to tell the user that the macro has run. We want the user to realize that we've done some magical work for them using Excel VBA. So we're going to go to the end of the routine here, and we're going to say flash up message box to tell user routine is complete. So I'm going to go for a little bonus here. We're not just going to tell them the routine is complete. We're going to include some meaningful information like a mini report. How many cells have we actually changed? how many cells have we changed here? And maybe you can guess, how are we going to get that information to the user about how many cells have changed? I won't tell you that now. See if you can work that one out yourself. Now we've got this in place, it's like a structure to our code, and we can go through a process of translation now. Translation, we can take each of these lines is roughly equivalent to one line of code in VBA. So we can take the concept, translate it into VBA. This is the way to do VBA programming. This is the way beginners should be doing it. This is the way to avoid trouble, avoid errors, get it clear in your mind, and then think about the syntax, think about the technical stuff. I hope you got something out of this video. Planning and conceptualization is one of those boring topics, but it really is essential for computer programmers. So I hope this video helps you plan and conceptualize your VBA code. I'll see you in the next video in the Essential Excel VBA Beginner Techniques series.